Hi everyone, welcome back to my quilt room. Today I'm going to show you my version of a flag quilt, a Quilt As You Go flag quilt, inspired by the beautiful free pattern by Sloan. I loved her design and used it as a jumping off point, but I did change the measurements to suit my own needs and style. So just a heads up though, her pattern is copyrighted, so I can't give you her dimensions. But I will show you my modified version, give you my dimensions. And I'm also going to show you how to do a 3-inch sashing today, as opposed to the normal sashing that we do is like 1.5. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that also. Now, if you would like a copy of hers, it is a free download. So I will put the link below in the description and you can go grab hers, and then you can also make her version too. So let's get started. So the first thing I did was cut my strips and my block for my stars, the blue part. So for the top part, you need 2.5-inch strips by 9, and you'll need 2 red and 2 white. And then for the bottom part, you'll need 2.5-inch by 16, and you'll need 2 red and 1 white. And then your star block, you will need a 7.5 by 8.5. So what I did was I just cut all my strips and my blocks, and I just stacked them together and then just took them all to the machine and sewed them all at once. So let's go to the sew machine and I'll show you how I put this together. Okay, so we have all our pieces, and what I'm going to do first is I'm going to sew the top portion of the stars or the stripes. And we're just going to put right sides together, and we're just going to sew red, white, line it up, and 1/4 inch all the way down. And now you could press this right now, or you can just finger press it down until you get them all down. And I'm just going to use my seam roller because that seems to do a really good job. And then I'm going to do the next red. Line that up. And then sew that 1/4 inch. Okay, just seam roll that again. That seems to do a really good job. It's this way. Sometimes it's hard to see white on white. Okay, so now we have our top part sewn. And before I attach it to my star block, I'm going to do the bottom part. We're going to do that the same way. And since this is a long expanse, you can pin this if you want, if you feel comfortable if they're not moving. And I'm going to do that because when I have a long expanse like this, it always separates on me. Okay, so I'm just going to put 2 pins. And just make sure it's lined up. And then we're going to sew the other red down. Okay. Pop a few pins in there. Okay, so now before I sew these together, I am going to give this a quick press. I have mat right here. So now we're going to attach our stripes to our stars here. And you want to make sure that the red is at the top, because when you put the bottom on, you start with the red, so you want the white at the bottom. Okay, so just match that up. And then sew that down. And if it's a little off, don't worry, we're going to square that up at the end. So I'm just going to sew that real quick because we're going to add our other block onto this. Okay, so now we're going to take our bottom part. We're going to line that up. And then it fits perfectly. I'm just going to throw a couple pins in here. Okay, so we're going to sew that down. And there we have it, our flag block. So now we're going to take this. I'm going to show you how to put this in as a Quilt As You Go block. So let's go back to the table and do that. So to put this into a Quilt As You Go block, we have our top, and now we're going to cut our backing and our batting slightly larger than our block. There's our backing and our batting. I'm just going to line that up. I want to make sure that it covers everything. just so you have enough plus a little extra for your top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to base that down just a little bit so it stays together while we're sewing this. And just a little. Make sure that one seam is not. Okay, so make sure my seams are flat. And we can do the other side. Spread that out, and then we're going to do the back also. Okay, so now to attach this, what I did was I just simply took it to the machine and I stitched in the ditch down all the lines, all these lines. And then what I did for the star block was to just make an X, and I did that in a navy blue thread. So let's go to the machine and I'll show you how I stitch this down. Okay, so I took my foot off and put my stitch in a ditch foot on. And I'm just going to reset my needle to the middle. And then basically I just ran the stitch in the ditch foot all the way down in between my stitchings. Okay, so now I'm going to change my thread and I'm going to mark my stars block, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so now that we have all that stitched down, what we're going to do is we're going to just draw an X on our flag part and with our harrow marker, and then we're going to sew in that diagonal. We're just going to mark that corner to corner. And I know I've showed this to you before in other videos, but just so you can see, I don't even know if you can see this really, but there's a line that it makes. And I like it because you don't have to mark up your fabric. But I don't know, sometimes it's the lighting, sometimes you can see it, sometimes you can't. So let's go to the machine and we'll sew that down. So I changed my thread to blue and I kept the bobbin on white so that it blends with the back. So I'm going to still use the stitch in the ditch foot, and I'm going to run it right along that line. I'm going to stitch in the ditch down this side and this side. So we'll go back to the table and I'll show you now how to start putting the blocks together. Okay, so now since we have that all sewn down, we now want to square up our blocks. Now with the dimensions I gave you, your block should be 16 by 14 and a half. So I'm going to square that up, and then I'm going to grab my other block and show you how to sash these all together. Okay, so we have our two of our blocks, and we want to sash these together. So we're going to do a larger sashing this time. And the way we're going to do that is I have a 3.5 strip, 3.5-inch strip, and this is going to go onto the back. So it's going to be right sides together on the back. Line that up. And then we have a 3-inch strip for the front. So again, we're going to do right sides together. And then we're going to sew that a 1/4 inch all the way down. And then I'm going to show you how we're going to attach that to this block. So I'll be right back. Okay, so we have that sewn down. And I'm just going to cut my threads off here. Okay, so now we're going to take our front piece and we're going to fold that over. So I'm going to just iron that so it stays down. And keeping our back piece folded under, we're going to take this block, flip it over, line it up, and we're going to sew that top edge of our sashing to the top edge of our block. Make sure that's lined up and make sure your blocks are even. And I'm going to put a couple pins or clips in that. And then we're going to sew that 1/4 inch all the way down. So we have that sewn down. Now I'm just going to press that so it stays flat. And then I'm going to flip this over. Now what I did was I cut 2-inch sashing, or excuse me, I cut 2-inch batting to go in between this. And it fits right in there. And I did overcut this, so let me just take some of that off. And now what we're going to do is we need to keep that batting down. So the last time we did a larger sashing, I did a zigzag. But this time, what I'm going to do is I bought this like seam tape to keep the batting down. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a strip. And I don't need it that wide. So this is a 1.5. And what I'm just going to do is I'm going to take my ruler and I'm just going to cut that in half. So it'd be 3/4 inches. And I'm just going to cut a piece off or cut it in half. Oops. So then we're going to take half of it and put it on this side. And for this side, you only want it right to the edge of that stitching. And then I'm just going to take it over here to the iron. I'm just going to press it. And that's really holding that down. And then this side really doesn't matter. This is so thin, it's not going to add any bulk. So just so long as you have it, I just put it like right in the middle. And then I'm going to iron that down. And I'm just pressing. I don't really want to move this. So, okay. So now that's pretty secure in there. That's not going anywhere. So now what I want to do is I want to take this back piece. I want to fold that over. Again, I'm going to press that so it stays nice and flat. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this and I'm just going to fold it under so that my edge just covers that stitch line, just like maybe an eighth over that stitch line. And I'm just going to fold that down. Okay. And I'm going to press that so it stays. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch on the front. So to keep this down and so it doesn't move. And I know I just ironed on my mat. You should never do that. I'll probably pay for that later. I'm going to take some glue and I'm just going to glue along that seam line. So like right in between the seam line and the batting. Just so it doesn't move when I take it to the machine and start sewing. Okay. I'm just going to press that down. And then I want to press that real quick. And now that'll really hold. That's not coming up anywhere. So now we're going to take this to the machine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do a top stitch on both sides all the way down. So let's go do that and I'll show you how I set that up. Okay, so we have our back all down, and what I'm going to do is on the front I'm going to do I'm going to change my foot out to my stitch in my ditch, and this is a little trick that I discovered. We're not going to stitch in the ditch, we're going to top stitch, but we're going to use the stitch in the ditch to guide my top stitch, and I'll show you what I mean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my needle. My stitch in the ditch foot has a wide hole right here, so I can move my needle back and forth. And what I discovered was that if I moved my needle past the hole where the stitch in the ditch would go, I'm going to put my stitch width at a 2.0, and then I'm just going to guide my metal bar right in my ditch, and that's going to give me the perfect top stitch, and it's going to be straight the whole way down. So I'll show you what I mean when I'm done. You can see how that looks. Okay, so now I don't know if you can see this, but if you look, and I'll show you on the other camera when I'm finished, this stitch is perfect top stitch, and it's the same width all the way down. So now what I'm going to do is I can move the needle the other way to stitch here, but since I only have 2 blocks, I'm just going to flip it. And again, I'm just rolling my block over, not because I don't have room, but because my camera's right there and I don't want to hit it. So I'm going to do this side now. Okay, so now I have 3 blocks sewn together, and I'm going to show you how to join the rows. Basically the same thing, but I realize I don't show attaching the rows very often. So let me grab I have 2 rows already done. I'm going to grab that and show you how to attach it to this. Okay, so here is 2 rows already finished, and it's a little wide, so you probably can't catch it all, but there's 2 rows and 3 blocks each. And I already have the sashing on the row itself. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to push back that. I already have the 3 inches on the front and the 3.5 on the back. So I'm going to push that 3.5 back because I don't want to sew that yet. I'm going to move the 3-inch forward, and I'm going to take this row, flip it, right sides together, line it up with the row, and I didn't trim this one up yet, but I'm going to line up the blocks so that I can sew this top block to the next row. And then I'm going to start pinning. Just try to line it up as best you can. I'm just going to get a bunch of clips. I like to heavily clip it because I don't want anything moving. And we're going to make sure that that sashing is attaching right to the edge. Okay, so now I'm just going to take that to the machine and sew a 1/4 inch all the way down. And another thing, remember, the whole point of Quilt As You Go is to not have so much bulk under your machine, because you're sewing on the right and everything else is on your left. So um, you're not putting all that bulk underneath the harp space there. So I'm going to go sew this down and I'll be right back. Okay, so we have that sewed down. So let me flip this real quick. Oops. Sorry if I just moved that. All right, so there we have it. Our other row is done. Well, it's attached to the top. So now we want to fold this back. We want to put our batting in. So I'm going to real quick iron this. Flip that over. Now we're going to put our batting in. So I have my 2-inch batting. I'm going to put it in between, and that's sashing area. And again, I'm using scrap batting, so these are short pieces. I'm just going to put some seam tape on that and hold it together. It looks like 3 pieces fit. So I'm going to take some tape. Put that right on there. Another piece for the other end. Okay. Then I'm going to take and measure out my longer piece. Okay, so first I'm going to iron this down. And then this one. Okay, then I'm going to take my long piece and I'm going to cut that 3/4 of an inch. And you don't have to be, totally perfect, just as best you can. All right, so bring this back. That in there. I'm going to do the back piece first because this one's just going to sit right like halfway. Okay, and then we're going to iron that down. I'm going to start the other side. And remember, we would just want to go right to the seam line. We don't want to go over the seam line. So that is all glued down. And now we want to take our back piece, fold it over, I'm just going to iron that down. Right. And if you notice, I do have blue on the back. I was kind of experimenting on doing the blue on the front for the stars and didn't realize I put a bobbin in too. So I have sort of blue and white on my quilt. So all right, so now we're going to fold this under just over that seam line. I'm just going to finger press it for right now. I'm going to press this down. So now we have that ironed down. And just because I don't want it to move, I am going to glue this. Okay, and then I'm going to take that to the machine and I'm going to do my top stitching. Okay, so we have our third row done. Flip this around. And this is the row that we just did. There's our sashing. And I have one more row to do. So I'm going to do that row. And when I get that finished, I'll be back and we'll put the wide sashing all around the quilt. Okay, so I have my fourth row done, which is right here. And now I'm putting the borders on, or I called it wide sashing earlier, but it's really the borders. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the sides and I'm measuring from the top to the bottom and cutting that accordingly. And for the borders now, we don't have to do the 3 and 3.5 because we're not attaching, we're only attaching binding to this. We're not attaching another row and then folding it over like we did on the back. So we can make the borders the same size. So I'm going to just do a 3-inch on the front and a 3-inch on the back. And then I'm going to put the batting in between. And as soon as I get that done, I'll be right back and we'll talk about the top and the bottom borders. So my side borders are on, and you can see that over here. We have the batting in there, and it's all sewn down, or glued down. And now I put my border on the top. I did a 3-inch on the front, 3-inch on the back. I'm going to put my batting inside, but I wanted you to see that all I did was cut this the length of the quilt plus the side border. So I'm going to do that for the top and the bottom, put my binding in, get that glued down, and then when I come back we will talk about binding. So I have all my borders on around all 4 sides. They all have their batting inside. And now I'm going to put on my binding. So I am doing a 2.5-inch binding, folded in half and ironed. And I'm doing it in blue because I think blue will really make this pop. So hopefully that's going to look good. So let's see how we're going to put this on. Now what I want to do is I want to start somewhere in the middle of the quilt. You don't want to start at the end because you need to join your ends when you get done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start like somewhere in the middle, somewhere about here. And you want to leave yourself at least oh, maybe about 12 inches for like a tail, so that you can join this at the end. So basically I'm just going to take the binding and raw edges together, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch all the way around the quilt. And I've shown this before, so if you want to see how like I do the corners or anything, I will link a video below that you can take a look at. So I'm just going to go do this real quick. I have my binding sewn all the way down, and I did it on the front this time, and I'm going to bring this to the back and then stitch in the ditch, and it's going to catch that back part. But I wanted to show you how to join the ends in case somebody was a beginner and didn't know how to do this. So I have these 2 tails, and what we need to do is we need to join this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one on my left, and I'm going to cut it right where it meets the last sewn edge there. So I'm going to cut that right there. Should I cut a little bit more off? Okay. Just so this one can lay down on top of it. And then I'm going to lay this over. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to back it off just a little bit because I want to see both the top and the bottom. And now my binding is 2.5 inches. So we need to connect a piece that is 2.5 inches. So since I cut that piece off, I know that this piece is 2.5 inches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this on top of here. And I'm going to grab my pen, and I'm going to mark the top on one side and the bottom on the other side. Okay, and I'm going to take that off. So now I can see that right here is where I want to connect the 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top piece and cut it right at that bottom edge here. And then I'm going to take the bottom edge and I'm going to cut that right where my top mark is. So right about here. Okay, so now I want to join these 2. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to lay this side face down. Move this back so you can see it. I'm going to lay this piece face down. I'm sorry, face up. And then this piece I'm going to lay face down. So we're going to put right sides together, and we're going to join this just like we do when we join our sashing or our binding to make it longer. So I'm going to put these right sides together, and then I'm going to sew my diagonal, and then it should lay down just like this. So let me get that sewn. I'll be right back and I'll show you how that looks. Okay, so we have that sewn down, and before I cut anything, you always want to make sure to check it. So as you see, we just sew that down just like we were joining any other binding, and then when you lay it down, it should fit perfectly in there. So what I want to do now is just to cut that excess off. Cut it about 1/4 inch. Oops. I'm just going to finger press that open. And then lay that down. And now I can continue to sew the rest of that. So I'm going to get that sewn. I'm going to turn my binding to the other side. And then I'm going to stitch in the ditch, which should catch that on the back side. And then our quilt will be done. So I'll be back when that's finished, and I'll show you the finished product. So here's the quilt all finished. And today we did the flag block in a Quilt As You Go method. We also put a larger sashing on. This is a 3-inch sashing. And I showed you how to attach the batting inside. And I also put a blue binding on it, which I think really makes this pop. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, I hope you subscribe and give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you know when my next video comes out. So as always, happy sewing and sew something happy.